You already know what time it is. It's your boy DJ Richie Skye back with some tea, interviews, recaps, and more. And be sure to check the links in the description of this video for trips, for books, one-on-one sessions, and more. Now let's get into the tea. Y'all, I figured I would give some Ralph energy today. Because is it not crazy that Ralph has a confessional and Kenya Moore does not? Make that make sense to me. All right, listen. I mean, I guess if you want to tell the complete story of Drew and Ralph, you may want his confessionals. But what happened to the complete story of Kenya Moore? That is so wild that he has one and she does not. And she has literally the biggest storyline on this show at this point. Now, of course, there's probably a reason for that, right? The reason being that if she left or if she was dismissed or whatever the case was before they got a chance to film confessionals, then maybe that's why she doesn't have them. However, after watching the footage, I'm not quite sure what Bravo's plan was and if they thought this whole thing through. It doesn't make sense to me based on what happened in last night's episode. And I'm just really going to go through some highlights from the episode, because highlights or lowlights, depending on how you look at them, because I just don't understand the logic. And I have been racking my brain all night trying to figure out what was the reason for any of this happening, right? It makes zero sense. So let's get into it. I want to dive into it by looking at a couple of tweets, statements, clips from last night's episode, while also consuming public opinion about what exactly happened. So for those of you guys who missed it, right, you will hear in this episode that it was indeed Brit that mentioned the pow pows and whips as she is getting into this altercation with Kenya Moore. It makes absolutely zero sense to me why she got so upset that she would mention pow pows and whips, especially considering that she had previously stated that she never mentioned those things. She said, and back in June, Brit said that she never owned a weapon and that she never threatened anyone. Today's episode proves that was a lie. Back in June of 2024, she says, it's never a good feeling being targeted or hazed by someone I thought would embrace me into a new circle. I never, what did she say? That I never met. For the record, I've never once had possession of any weapons or threatened anyone ever. I've never even been to jail in a fight or even had as much as a speeding ticket. That's not in my character. I am hurt by the narrative that's being displayed. Wrong is wrong. But then in the very same episode, we hear it.
This is a lot. I still got my pistols.
Like, for what reason, Brit, would you have to say that you still have your pistols? I just don't understand it. I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me based on the argument that was being had. And I'm not going to dive into next week's episode because I feel like I'm still trying to process this week's episode, because I do have my thoughts on what Kenya Moore does in response to this. I just want to kind of go through some responses to the episode, and I want to touch on some brief parts of the episode that I did feel like were very good or very interesting, or that illuminated parts of people's characters or their personas on the show, right? So Kenya Moore's response to the episode, she says, being the longest standing Real Housewives of Atlanta member threatened with whips and pow pows by a newcomer 3 weeks into filming. Seeing this obsession play out is scary. I wanted protection and assurances that the threats would be taken seriously. I may be strong, but I'm not bulletproof. She then goes on to tweet, being the longest standing Real House. Well, we already got that.
Many things though.
Then someone says, are you going to tell your side? We need to know because Bravo is going to slice and dice what really happened. She says, yes. Then she says, it's so painful to see my storyline being told by somebody else. With that said, I really appreciate Kelly being so kind and supportive to me. Then someone else tweeted, I wonder if Bravo TV is going to edit it and make you look bad and Britt look like the victim. They're good for that. She says, I may be a lot of things, but I'm not bulletproof. Praying the world will see what provoked me to take the actions that I took. Candace tweeted this. They always try to humble you when you're smarter than them, and they're show ponies. Kenya deserves better. That's all I'm going to say about it. To which Kenya responded with the heart emoji. And I'm just taking this from the Talk of Shame Instagram. Okay. A couple of things I want to dive into. The scene with Kenya Moore and Kelly was so good to me. It was so good. It was such a meaty scene in the sense of we really got some good. Every time Kelly's on the screen, I feel like we get more information out of her, even though I kind of now there's a part of me that's kind of like looking at Kelly with a little bit of a side eye because I feel like when she was saying the things about the pow pows and whips, she was actually speaking to you. So how did you not hear any of this? And I go back to her on Watch What Happens Live, I think it was, where she said it was so much commotion going on. And it's like, no, she was clearly talking to you, unless you just really didn't think at the time that it really meant anything. You know, because Kelly in the episode is seen kind of laughing it up and yakking it up with Britt. And I'm just like, I don't understand for the life of me what got Britt so worked up that she needed to go there. Yeah, Kenya calling you a peasant is probably an annoyance or a nuisance, but it does seem like Britt wants some level of validation from Kenya or some level of energy from Kenya that Kenya hasn't given her yet. And it's likely because Kenya doesn't really know her that well yet. I don't know that Kenya thought two cents about the whole wedding ring situation because Kenya's new and these are new girls and she hasn't had a moment to get to know them. And the whole wedding ring situation from the first episode, it was a little bit confusing. I can see where Kenya might have been a little bit confused by it, right? So I think that maybe Britt was misreading Kenya in some way. And maybe Britt was already on the defensive because she's already stated that she really doesn't have a lot of other girlfriends. So maybe not having that level of girlfriend energy around you, you are more prone to misread the energy or read too much into energy that can seem a little bit catty, right? But when you don't know somebody, you kind of have to give them a little bit of grace to like have a one-on-one first, have a sit-down ponderosa, like see what comes of the relationship before jumping to that conclusion and then further jumping into the pow pows and whips of it all. What is a whip? Okay, like, I mean, what is a whip? When I'm thinking of whip, I'm thinking of Indiana Jones, okay? So what is the whip of it all? What do we do? I mean, I've heard of being pow pow whip, but I ain't never heard of what is the whip doing? I mean, what are we whipping? I don't get it. But back to the scene with Kelly and Kenya. I felt like Kelly and Kenya had such a good dynamic. And so it was fascinating to see that it would have been fascinating to see Kelly be the bridge between Britt and Kenya because she's cool with Britt at this point, and she's also becoming cool with Kenya. And the scene with Kenya revealed so much that I felt like, oh, why okay, let's ask some questions for me. I got some questions. Because if we're being told by Kenya that she is scared about having this, the salon, the spa, I think that that's such a big, that's a huge thing. So for the life of me, I can't fathom why you would use your event to make it about Brit, because if you have felt like you put your daughter's college fund into this, that's real. That's real. I mean, and having a business, I mean, it's scary. It's real. Doing these types of big things is so scary. It is super scary. I get it. So it saddens me that you would utilize your salon opening to get to as some get back on somebody that ultimately did threaten you, right? What to me, what my questions are, what was the recourse from the network, from the production company with regards to the threats at hand? Let me tell you why I want to know that. Because on Married to Medicine, when you had a situation between King and you had a situation between Dr. G, somehow or another, HR got involved and they put the kibosh on those two people filming together. So, given that there was some concern about the pow pows and the whips, was HR not maybe called in and asked to investigate and then to keep these two women away from each other? And to me, that would have been the ideal situation, would be to investigate, and that would be a simple matter of listening to the audio from that night. Go back and listen to the audio. That would take a mere hour to sort and find, and then somebody could come to a resolution of, okay, either you apologize to Kenya and that's that on that, or you can't come back to work, because we can't have that type of energy on a Real Housewives of Atlanta set, especially in light of what we now know occurred on the set of Married to Medicine. Like, I'm just trying to understand what the production companies and the networks decision making was like at that time, to then say, to go as far as to risk losing Kenya and keeping Brit, especially in the interim between the time period of Kenya's opening and when Brit actually said these things. That's what I don't understand. Like, as a producer or as someone at the network, I would be thinking to myself, okay, let's investigate. Let's see what was said. Let's listen to the footage, and then let's act accordingly from there. Do you feel safe filming around her at this point? Right? That would have been my thought process. Can we mediate this? Can we keep this out of the media? Can we keep this contained? How do we mitigate this from becoming a larger issue, especially if one of our OG staff or one of our OG cast members is feeling unsafe? Did Kenya say anything to, I mean, well, no, she said it to the girls. And if the girls brought it back up later, as we see, they're going to have a meeting about it. So why not? I just don't. I guess I got to see what happens in next week's episode. But clearly, the footage shows and the audio shows that Brit did say these things. So now, where do we go from here? And now, in the present, what is the network having to say? Especially because the audience reaction is very, very strong right now on some, we want Kenya Moore back, or justice for Kenya Moore. What were you thinking when you aired this episode in this way, without having said, okay, oh my God, Kenya was right, or oh my God, we didn't make the right moves? I don't get it. I really don't get it. It's just wild to me. It's very wild that this is where we are. And again, I guess I gotta see next week's episode, because I also have to gauge how the cast responded. I've got to try to gauge what happened. Will Kenya Moore speak about this anywhere? Will she, I mean, to a certain degree, here's what I would be thinking if I'm Kenya. I guess it depends on whether or not she intends to go back to the show. Can she do an interview and speak out about this? I don't know. Because that also depends. Like if Kenya Moore does an interview and she speaks about this and she speaks about the injustice of it all, then I would have to wonder if that would be throwing down the gauntlet against the network. And would they feel like she was retaliating against them and then bar her from coming back? Or does she tell her story and sue the network? Like, I don't know. I don't know what the recourse of this whole situation is. All I know is that the fan backlash right now, it is something serious. Okay? It is something serious. And I'm not for sure why Brit would say that she never said these things about the weapons. I don't really get that, because the footage clearly shows you saying it more than once. So I don't know what that's about either. Like, why would you do that knowing that they could easily play this or play it back? I only have a couple of assertions, like assumptions that I can make. One being that maybe they didn't want Kenya back in the first place. And so when Kenya does what she does next week, they were like, "Oh, okay, we got to take you out of here." Because we do know that there has typically sometimes been an I don't want to say overcorrection, but there's sometimes like an emergency response to certain things happening as a result of other things happening, i.e., the Carolyn Manzo of it all and the Brandy Glanville of it all, and that whole situation that occurred with Ultimate Girls Trip is now the network sort of like really hesitant about resuming filming with anybody that presents any ideas of um nudity or whatever comes up next week. I don't know. And based on the ladies' reaction, they clearly felt in the cast, they clearly felt like there were some boundaries being crossed. So is the network also taking into account what they're reacting to? I really don't know. It's just very confusing. And these are the questions that have been on my mind since last night. I've been racking my brain trying to figure out and understand what was the reason. A couple of other things that I feel like we do need to mention. I felt like this episode was also very revealing about Porsha, um, and Shamia's friendship, and just Porsha in general. Um, Porsha, I also want to know. I don't know if this is, but it's interesting that they didn't. Was Portia's cousin the one that was featured in this episode? Was she the person that passed? And if so, you would think that upon her inclusion in the episode that they might have put like a little bit of a, in memory of type situation. I could be mistaken and I hope that I am, but I just got to be real and I got to ask you, I mean, is that did they post that anywhere? Did I see it? Did I miss it in all the other chaos? Also, too, with the mention of pow pows and whips, I mean, do we need a disclaimer for that? I mean, I don't know, because for a lot of people, that was a little bit like people are really responding to that level of discourse too on a housewives show. Like, why are we mentioning that? The other thing is, for me, with Portia at the event that Angela Oakley threw at the bank, Portia did two very questionable things to me. And I just feel like I want to tell Shamia, that's not your friend. That's not your friend. I think Kelly confirmed on the episode that Portia also said, well, that sounds good. That must be Drew. When Shamia played her song for the girls, Portia was adamant that that was Drew. Why would Shamia be playing Drew's song? What sense does that make? So, like, really, what sense does that make? It makes zero sense. And to be continuously insistent on it when your BFF is the one who is saying this is next level shade to me. I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, what would be the reason why you would do that? Even if you don't know your best friend's voice, why would you not simply just say, yes, girl, yes, yes. Send me that song now so I could play it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's your BFF. You don't even like Drew at this moment. So what are you talking about? It doesn't make sense to me. Another thing that doesn't make much sense to me, and it's maybe this is what Porsha is referring to with Charles Oakley, but she basically says she knows something about Charles. And I'm kind of like, okay, when Angela's asking you straight up, what do you know? And Portia's like, no, I'm gonna save it for later. No, girl, you gonna say it right now, unless you want to start talking about your husband and what's going on with you. But Angela's like, she won't even talk about what's going on with her. So why would you bring up somebody else's husband when you are already going through marital stumbling blocks, or at least you're having all of these other issues with the person that you are getting a divorce from? You would think that you might be a little bit more sensitive to what she's going through, or what she's been through, or what you would know. Or why not even just if you're going to bring it up, say it. Like, that's my only thing. If you're going to be bold enough to say I know something, then say it. But like, don't dangle an innuendo in front of somebody's face and then expect them to be cool with it. Or maybe you don't care. But it just kind of seemed like on the heels of that she did with Shamia, she's looking to me a bit like, it's almost like, it reminds me of the Porsha that we saw in Portia's Family Matters. But, here's the thing. On these shows, I always say this: everybody's wrong and everybody's right. That's how these shows work. That's how they work. That is how they work. There has to be some level of dysfunction. But to me, that was just, it was kind of low down and dirty. And I just felt like, Porsha, you're better than that. You're better than that. I like my Porsha throwing a little bit of light shade and just kind of being a little ditzy and fun. You know what I'm saying? That's Porsha. That's what we want to see. But this Porsha feels very Mean Girls to me. So I don't know. And maybe she got it out. Maybe this is her way of supporting Shamia by dangling this carrot in front of Angela's face. But it really didn't seem like nobody else was really paying that much attention to the conversation between Porsha and Angela at that moment anyway. We also get Kelly calling out Drew for not purchasing anything from the Balmain event. And when Drew tries to show that she asked about the pricing, or she asked about the jacket for her son, Kelly then later on says, I think she says, you don't Watch What Happens Live or in the confessional, that Drew actually never really showed her a purchase confirmation. And the store never had a purchase confirmation from Drew either. In the midst of calling her out about that, when Drew shows the phone, Dennis is texting, which is also kind of awkward. The other awkward thing to me in this episode was watching Drew and Ralph, because I thought it was, from my understanding, that Drew and Ralph could only communicate with each other via the texting app that the judge had ordered. So to see them in the scene together, while I appreciate the scene, it just felt like, well, I thought you said something different earlier. So maybe, are we at a new phase now and we've not covered this update? Or also the fact that you guys seem to be having a relatively peaceful conversation that really, it really comes into a stark contrast with what you've been telling us about how you guys have been communicating before. If you guys have gotten to a better place, then I think that's great, obviously, for the kids and for your own mental sanity. But it was kind of a very nice, nasty conversation that was laced with a little bit of passive aggressiveness, but also like this subtle chemistry that they clearly still have. So I don't know. Not to mention she doesn't really know what a narcissist is. I don't know. What do you guys think? those are my questions. Those are my burning questions that I have from watching the episode. I am clueless as to what the network was thinking with all of this. I'm clueless as to what Brit was thinking. You know, the limited interactions that she seemingly had with Kenya, with, I mean, Kenya did give her a hug. And yeah, she did give her the church pat, but she hugged her. She sat right beside her. I mean, granted, that was probably the only other seat left, but I mean, I just kind of felt like, even with the question that Brit asked of Kenya, can you speak to her nicely? Can you speak to Brit nicely? I just think that it wasn't all that to get so upset about. And I understand you feel like somebody had been pushing your buttons, but your buttons can't be that easily pressed. It's Housewives. It's Kenya Moore. Like, it would be better to playfully banter it up with her, because that would have been better than going off the deep end with her. But that's just my opinion. What do you guys think? Let us know in the chatterization down below. I'm still trying to process this episode. I have so many questions. I don't know if we'll ever get answers to any of these questions. You guys let me know what your thoughts are down below. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Like this video if you like reality TV related content. I will not be wearing this in my next recap. This was just for the in the spirit of Ralph of it all. But with that being said, I will catch you in the next video.